Most people have a core connection of making a statement to themselves of, I'm not good enough. And when I say core connection, it's more than just a negative thought. Core connections go kind of to the core of what we believe about ourselves, and often was started or initiated by something or some sort of situation in our childhood. So we can all have negative thoughts, and I know you probably watch a lot of people that talk about getting rid of those negative thoughts. Core connections go a little deeper, and they're a little harder to get rid of, okay? I've been doing the Mentally Strong method on myself for over 20 years, and this I'm not good enough continues to creep up on me sometimes. And in the 5 years I've been doing it professionally on other people, most people have this core connection of I'm not good enough. Why is that? Where does that come from that so many of us are struggling with that? Part of the good part about getting this out is that it kind of makes us feel a little better that everyone is feeling like this at some point in their life or at some point in their day, that this I'm not good enough is a common internal belief system. And so where does it come from? Well, somewhere in your childhood, and if you did a thought map, you could kind of figure that out specifically for you. Maybe culturally it comes from kind of this perfectionist mentality, fairy tales, and if these things happen perfectly, then you will have a happy ending. And still, our movie industry has a happy ending. The movies that make the blockbusters have a happy ending. And if you know my story did not have a happy ending as I fought for my children and I lost them to death of a very rare neurodegenerative condition. And so, this fairy tale mentality, happy ending mentality, maybe puts into that I'm not good enough. Like if I were to have been better, my ending to that life's chapter would have been different. Maybe it's the punishment mentality that we have. You get called out when you do something wrong and rarely called out when you do something right. From childhood all the way through adult employment and relationships and things like that. But it's helpful to know that we're all struggling with this. And I have personally gone through a thought map, and you can see here, this was just today, right? It still creeps up that I'm not good enough. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never thought I would manage people. And here I am running a multi-million-dollar business with 39 employees, and we are, managing that, my leadership skills, and just sometimes feeling like I'm not enough. I want people to like me. And so when I'm criticized, that kind of pushes this button. You know how we talk about triggers and pushing internal buttons? Triggers are those external things that push an internal button. And the core connection, I call it a core connection, is that internal button. So when someone criticizes me, even positive criticism, and I try to take that, I need to be able to take that to be a good leader, right? It still pushes that button of I'm not good enough. When I make a mistake, it pushes that button that I'm not good enough. And, the last 20 years of fighting for Reggie and Maya, and both of them dying from DRPLA, I wasn't good enough. And I know there was no treatment. I know that there's no one that could have done it differently or better. But that core connection was already there from my childhood. When I was young, I did not do well in elementary school. I definitely didn't do well in high school. I sometimes thought I was smart, but academically the world was telling me I wasn't smart. I couldn't do well on standardized testing. I didn't do well on assignments that took a lot of time and attention. I now know that I have some attention problems and I can compensate for those and that I'm smarter in other areas. But that took time for me to figure that out. So it was already ingrained in me that I'm not good enough, not smart enough. And then whenever life tells me that, right, or confirms that, it like pushes that button. And so I think this is why, because we're not talking about it enough, we're not talking about these core connections enough, and we are focusing on the things that confirm it, right? In opposite psychology, they would say, well, just go around and say, I am enough, I am enough. And in some situations, I am enough. But when I make a mistake, I'm like, see, told you, I'm not enough. Because it goes deep and it's a core thing about, and we talk about self-love and knowing where we are. And I want to bring in a story, a public story that's going on right now between Taylor Swift and her boyfriend and Simone Biles and her boyfriend or husband. And everyone is praising Taylor Swift's boyfriend for being attentive and validating how amazing she is. Taylor Swift has been very open and public about her personal struggles of not feeling like she's enough. And she is literally the best in her field, right? But we're giving praise to that external validation from her boyfriend. Whereas with Simone Biles and her husband did not give that external validation, and were kind of chastising him and saying, how dare he, she is the greatest gymnast of all times, and he is not validating that and recognizing that. Well, what does that say for me? I'll never be a Taylor Swift. I'll never be a Simone Biles, right? Like we're saying that there has to be this external validation. We're saying that instead of like, where's our self-love? Where is our belief in that we are fulfilling our purpose? My purpose is not to be a music star. My purpose is not to be the greatest gymnast, right? But I have a purpose, and that's where I am enough, right? Because when we look at this I am enough statement, we think it's with everything. And we've got to believe in ourselves. And so my 3 things that I want you to think about as you're trying to counteract this thought that you have of I am not enough. Where are you enough? And there's 3 things that we have to have self-love. 1, we have to know ourselves. I spent the year before I turned 50, which was also the year after Maya's death, trying to figure out who am I? And knowing myself, knowing my gifts. I still couldn't pass a standardized test. I mean, maybe if I spent a lot of time and energy studying, I did it for, my nursing exams and things like that, but that's not my gift. And, knowing myself and knowing what I'm good at and spending time and energy in that space, because that's where I am enough. Comparing ourselves to, this external perfectionist standard and everyone having to validate that is not realistic for self-love, right? So you got to know yourself in order to like yourself. We always talk about self-love, self-love, self-love. There's parts of myself that I don't even like. I'm getting better at that, right? But as a culture, as I talk to people, I often see and hear statements that you don't even like yourself. So you have to know yourself, like yourself, and then you can love yourself. You can't love what you don't like. And so remember those 3 things. And I teach that when I'm teaching the development psychology of children. So if you have young children and you don't want them to have some of that same negative self-talk that you do, at those early ages, 5 to 7 years old, help them know themselves. 8 to 11, make sure they like themselves so that when they're at those teenage years, they can embrace loving themselves. I'm Christy Bundukumar. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I teach on the barriers to mental strength and success. And we can get over those barriers, whether they are internal dialogue or things that have happened to you, and you can be successful.